Hey Aspire athletes, it's Brooke here for week 2, and today we're going to be talking about the athlete's plate. So it's really important that we properly fuel our exercise, and like you guys know, as you've learned, food equals fuel. So we're going to dive right in and talk about the athlete's plate. So what we're going to talk about today is how athletes have different needs. We've talked about that briefly. We're also going to talk about an overview of the food groups so you guys can easily understand what I'm talking about when we talk about how to fuel on easy days, moderate days, hard days, and then the most important, I feel, that we're going to talk about today is staying hydrated. So athletes have very different needs than the average person. Again, food is fuel. So athletes have increased energy needs, which means we have to eat more kilocalories to stay adequately nourished. Athletes also have increased protein needs because we put our bodies under a lot of stress. So we have to replace all of that stress that we're putting on our body with protein to help us repair those muscles and those tissues. And then athletes also have increased hydration needs because we're exerting ourselves a lot more, so we're sweating a lot more than the average person. So we have to take all of these things into consideration when we try to fuel ourselves and maximize our performance. So I briefly want to touch on the different food groups. I'm sure most of you probably know the different food groups, but just to go over them very quickly. So the first food group is grains, and that's any of your breads, any of your rices, your quinoa, anything like that. We also have protein, which is the lean meats, your beans, your tofu, and your legumes. So anything like that is considered a protein. And then we have fruit and vegetables, which is pretty self-explanatory. I'm sure you guys know the different fruits and vegetables. And then we also have dairy as a separate food group, which is your yogurt, your milk, cottage cheese, ice cream, anything like that. So those are the different food groups. And then we're going to jump right into our athlete's plate. So we're first going to talk about easy day nutrition. So depending on the level of activity, your nutrition needs change. And I got all of these resources from teamusa.org/nutrition. They have a lot of good stuff on their website. If you guys are ever curious, you can check out that website. So when we have an easy day or you're just doing weight management, maybe you're not doing, 2+ hours of training every day, you're going to want to fill your plate a little bit differently. This is a great visual for you guys to kind of understand how to fill your plate up. So on an easy day, you want to fill half your plate with fruits and vegetables. You're going to want to fill a quarter of your plate with whole grains and another quarter of your plate with a lean protein. And then you can add any fat, like 1 teaspoon of fat. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to measure it out. But you can get anything from avocado, oils, nuts, seeds, cheese, and butter for your fat source. And that's just on the side. Then you can have water or any sort of beverage on the side of for the easy day. And then again, any spices or flavors that you want. So this is just a great visual for you guys to understand that on an easy day, you fill up half your plate with vegetables, a quarter of your plate with whole grains, which, as we talked about, are the pastas, the rices, potatoes, the cereals, breads, and beans. And then a lean protein, again, poultry, beef, ground beef, fish, eggs, low-fat dairy, soy, tempeh, and then legumes and the nuts. So hopefully that makes sense for an easy day. Now we're going to come to a moderate day of training. So a moderate day might include just like a regular training day for you guys, not a super hard workout, but just a maintenance day. So you would fill about a third of your plate with vegetables, a third of your plate with grains, and a third plate with protein. So the portions don't have to be perfect, but you guys get the idea with this visual here. And again, you can see how it changed just a little bit slightly. You're going to want to have more grains and less fruits and vegetables. And we know that because we need more carbohydrates with the more energy that we're expending. So that kind of makes sense, right? And then you can have, fresh fruit as a side or as a snack if you're not really feeling like that super hungry at a meal. And then again, you're going to have those fats somewhere in your day. You can have fats, again, as a snack. Fresh fruit and nuts are a great snack, and we'll talk about snacks in the later weeks. But I just want you guys to understand how your meals change depending on how hard you are working out that day. So the last day we're going to talk about is a hard nutrition, or a hard day, and how to fuel yourself. So as you can see, the grains take up half of your plate on a hard day. So this is if you're having, a really hard workout, or you have a race day, or a meet, a game, anything like that. So half your plate with grains, because again, carbohydrates help fuel our energy for athletics especially. So we want to make sure that we're replenishing with plenty of carbohydrate, plenty of grains, and then you still want to have vegetables, and you still want to have the protein in there as well. So this is a big difference from our easy day, right? We are switching the half plate fruits and vegetables with the half plate of grains on a hard day. So again, we want to make sure that we're refueling ourselves properly. So now we're going to jump right into hydration and why hydration is so important in the athlete. So hydration helps us regulate our body temperature, it enhances our recovery, supports our immune system, decreases muscle cramps, improves our focus, and keeps our muscles, joints, and organs lubricated. And it's especially important with athletes because if we get dehydrated, it can be very dangerous. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how to identify signs and symptoms of dehydration. So for me personally, when I get dehydrated, I immediately get a headache, and that's when I know I should probably drink more water. So a headache is a really easy way to identify if we are dehydrated. The other thing is muscle cramps. After a workout, if you're feeling really crampy, you got to replenish with some water. Muscle cramps is very common in athletes that are dehydrated. And if you ever wake up at night with, a calf cramp, a foot cramp, drink some water. It's most likely because you're dehydrated. Now, a more serious sign and symptom of dehydration is nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. And if these things don't get resolved, within a few hours, I would contact a doctor just because it is very dangerous if you are dehydrated and you're vomiting and having diarrhea. So make sure you hydrate so you don't get to a dangerous level like this. So another sign and symptom of dehydration is elevated heart rate. So if you feel like your heart is racing and you're just, sitting down or standing up, drink some water, you're probably dehydrated and that heart rate will come down. And then another symptom is intolerance to the heat or the cold. So if you're standing outside and you're like, oh my gosh, I just can't even bear to be out here right now, you probably need to refuel with some water or a Gatorade. And then it's also really easy to become dehydrated in the cold because our body is working really hard to keep our internal temperature up. And in Ohio, we have some pretty cold winters, so if you're ever outside training in the cold, it is really easy to become dehydrated, almost easier than if we became dehydrated in the heat. So keep that in mind. If you cannot stand the cold and you've been outside for a long time, it's probably because you are dehydrated. And then another thing that is the sign and symptom of dehydration is feeling unfocused and tired. And this goes right along with the first symptom of the headache. If you're feeling foggy or you just can't focus on anything, you are probably dehydrated. And this is really easy to fix by just drinking some water. So there's some less serious signs and symptoms of dehydration and some more serious signs and symptoms of dehydration, but it's just really important for you guys to understand, the different stages. And like I said, the less serious signs and symptoms are that headache, the cramping, and then the feeling unfocused, like kind of like you have brain fog. And then the more serious symptoms are that nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea, and the elevated heart rate. So just make sure that you're aware of how much you're drinking and then also how you're feeling as well. So the factors that affect our dehydration, one day we might not need as much water and another day we might need a lot more. It really depends on the different day, how you're feeling, and then of course where you are. So extreme temperatures actually increase our needs for water. So if it's really hot or really cold, we're going to need more water in these extreme temperatures. And then elevation, we need more. at really high levels of elevation. So if you're ever training out in Colorado, that's an example of when you would need more water. Humidity, I'm sure we've all experienced how humidity can impact our hydration needs. Humidity causes us to sweat a lot more, so we need to replace that with water. The intensity of our workouts also affect our hydration. So again, the harder our workouts are, the more water that we're going to need. And then if you're a heavy versus a light sweater, this is going to affect your hydration too. Personally, I sweat a lot when I work out, so I know that I need a little bit more water, maybe than someone that doesn't sweat as much as I do. And then if you are a salty sweater, so if you ever get, salt deposits on your face or your arms when you're sweating, you're going to want to replace that with water and a Gatorade if you are a salty sweater, just because if you are a salty sweater, that means your electrolytes are being pulled out faster than someone that isn't a salty sweater. So we want to make sure that we replace those electrolytes with a Gatorade or a Powerade. So I hope that these factors all kind of make sense. What one person needs is not what another person needs. So it's very, very individualized, which is why the easiest way to determine if you're hydrated is through your urine output. So if you are properly hydrated, you'll be between a 1 and a 3, so a very pale yellow. It is also possible to overhydrate. So if you are at a 1, you might be overhydrated. So you really want to be between a 2 and a 3 to make sure that you're properly hydrated. And then if you're anywhere from a 4 to an 8, you need to drink more water. If you're between, a 6 and an 8, you're really at increased risk for cramping and heat illness, which is that the heat illness is the nausea, the vomiting, and the diarrhea. So try to stay away from a 6 to an 8. Between a 4 and 5, just drink more water and you'll easily be back up to a 2 or a 3. So I hope this chart makes a little bit of sense. And if you're ever wondering if you're hydrated, refer to this chart. This is a super important chart for you guys. And like I said, everyone is going to need different fluid needs. So you really just want to measure your hydration status based on what your urine output is. So the best ways to hydrate. It's not a secret. Water is the absolute best way to hydrate. So drink water consistently throughout the day. It doesn't matter, if you're drinking a whole bunch before you work out. I think it's best to drink water consistently day to day to ensure that you have adequate hydration and that you aren't putting yourself at risk for dehydration. So when you wake up, have 2 glasses of water, carry a water bottle around with you throughout the day just to make sure that you always have access to water. And once you start consistently hydrating, you guys are going to be able to tell when you're dehydrated. So if the sports recovery drinks come into play when you are working out in extreme temperatures or you're exercising for longer than 60 minutes. So the Gatorades and Powerades are important if you guys are doing longer than 60-minute workouts, which I'm sure you all are. So you can have, a small Gatorade or a small Powerade in these instances. And then other ways to hydrate are to eat plenty of fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables are between 85 and 95% water. So watermelon is pretty much all water. So that's a great way to hydrate. And then you can also hydrate through teas and smoothies. We actually get some water from what we eat too. So just to keep that in mind. But again, water, water, water. That's the absolute best way to hydrate. So then a quick wrap up for everything that we talked about today. Again, athletes have different needs. Athletes have increased energy needs, so we need to have more calories. Athletes have increased protein needs. So we got to make sure that we're getting enough protein to replenish our muscles during exercise. And then athletes also have different hydration needs. They have increased hydration needs. So if you're following your plate based on the training intensity, you're going to ensure that you get adequate energy, adequate protein, and again, adequate hydration. So create your plate based on those easy days, the moderate days, or the hard days. Again, the easy days have half of your plate fruits and vegetables, quarter of your plate grains, quarter of your plate protein. The moderate days splits everything up into thirds, And then the hard days, you're going to want half your plate carbohydrate or grains, a quarter of your plate fruits and vegetables, and a quarter of your plate protein. So hopefully that all makes sense for you guys. And I didn't give you specific calories or protein because everybody has different needs. So if you have specific questions about your specific needs, feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to do a workup on you based on your specific training and your specific needs. And then you guys also want to make sure that you're hydrating for optimal performance. So drink that water, know the signs and symptoms of dehydration, and also replenish with Powerade or Gatorade if you're working out for longer than 60 minutes. So I hope this was helpful today. Again, it's very individualized. If you guys have questions about your individualized needs, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to work with you and make sure that you're getting enough energy and protein and, of course, hydration throughout your day. And then I'll see you next week for week 3. Have a good day, guys.